Hello again, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your dinner. Please feel free to continue eating or drinking coffee or whatever. Our two authors are up here and they're raring to go. So we are just so pleased to have Nancy Stevenson and Sean Wilson with us tonight to talk about becoming debut authors later in life. In addition to both being published authors, Nancy and Sean have a number of other things in common. Both have lived in the Washington, D.C. area. Both are glad they're not living there now. And they're very happy to be in Chicago. Both have degrees from American University in D.C., and both of them have written mysteries. But when it comes to process, they have different approaches. So we will begin with Nancy, and she'll talk about her approach. Then we'll move on to Sean, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. And when we begin the questions, please feel free to use your mics at your tables. Flip on the switch and off again. You'll get it. You'll get it. And with that, we'd like to begin and open it up. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
So Nancy told me to start, and I asked her because I haven't written precise words down. I'm just going to be talking. So if I get going too long, Nancy has promised to go or something. So
or someone will.
Or someone will. Yes, good. Even better. Everybody might. But I want to make sure that I don't overuse the time that we have, because Sean and I have talked together about this program, and what she has to say is very interesting. So I want to make sure that she has plenty of time to do that. Thank you, Nancy Thompson, for all the work that you've done to make this possible. In her emails to me, she also referenced Katie Patterson. And so I checked to see if Katie Patterson was on the staff, and she was it was listed that she was head of the youth programs. So congratulations, Cornerstone, you are now teenagers. And that makes me sort of middle-aged, which is okay, but 90 is much better. It's more fun. You have too many stresses in the 50s and 60s. So thank you, Cornerstone members, for being here and for coming to talk to shall I call us elderly writers? Maybe not.
Young at heart.
Young at heart. Better. Well, now we know we're teenagers. Yes. In the youth division. For me, writing was a lark. It was fun. I started it late in life, and my sister was a great writer. My father was a great writer, and I was a lousy writer all my life. But we had a grandchild, and I wanted to tell stories to her, and she lived in Montana. So you had to write them. I had to write them. They weren't so great, but they got me started. And for me, like Dr. Seuss, all the places you will go, writing is an adventure. And when Sharon Wilson writes of the friendly, person-oriented pubs and restaurants, places in Washington tourists may never see, it's very friendly, and it's a side of Washington that my book, Capital Code, doesn't deal with. My book, Capital Code, is really about the fun that we had as a young family arriving in Washington and wanting to see the sights. And so we went on excursions, and we went to a lot of places, including we biked down to the wharf to buy fish food, and then my husband would cook paella. A great thing for me but also just one way of seeing the other side of Washington. Monuments are filled with history and the story of the U.S. I mean, the Capitol itself grows. It grew from being just a little tiny place on one side with the Senate and the Supreme Court and the House, and then they had to grow, and the House then has a side of its own. So that growth and that history is wrapped into everything that we did in Washington. And that was the Lincoln Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, the Library of Congress, all of those great places that I tried to put into a story about Washington for kids because it was so much fun for us. I wanted that history to be fun for them as well. Getting back to Sean's work, she's also Sharon in real life. That's a secret, don't tell. In Sean's Duplicity, she not only writes about Washington, but she writes about Chicago and the spirit of baseball and music and the lake and all the things that all of us love. So you must read Duplicity. You'll enjoy, having read Relentless, you will enjoy her detective that you will meet again in Duplicity. And Sean tells me that she's got a third one on the way. So you get to know Brick. He's a treat. Our family lived in Washington from 1970 to 1981. And those were interesting years, and there's been changes, as some people may have noticed. In fact, Nancy noticed it in her introduction. When we arrived, senators worked from Monday through Friday. Now I'm told that they work from Tuesday till Thursday, and on Thursday afternoons they dial for dollars. My husband, much to his staff's dismay, and two members of that are here tonight to verify this word, but they were very upset that he never dialed for dollars. And that's hard on a staff, and it's hard on campaigns, but it wasn't the way he used his time. Senators also then got together to mark up bills. I'm told, and again, I don't know this firsthand, but I'm told that now the staff does most of that marking up. But Ad talked about the markup sessions and the give and take, maybe sometimes more take, maybe sometimes more give, but that went into the preparation of bills. And another change is that we had friends on both sides of the aisle, including the senior senator from Illinois, who was Chuck Percy, and Ad and he worked very closely together. I don't think that's happening today. My husband was a workaholic, but he loved the explorations that we did, and we not only went to the wharf for the food for the paella, but we went to a hike on the C&O Canal and Billy Goat Trail. The Capitol itself has that history of growth, but on Ad's staff was an expert on the Capitol. She's unfortunately no longer alive, but I thought I knew the Capitol pretty well and gave some tours. But in the research for Capitol Code, I learned new things. You have to do research for writing. And that research, for me, was great fun. One of the things I learned about the Capitol was that when the Capitol was all in one small building with the Supreme Court and the Senate and the House, there was a fire from the gas lamps that were still used, and they had to tear up the floor and put it down a new one. And there are cat's paws in the new floors, and I hadn't known that. And it was really fun to do the research and go and see those cat's paws, and to realize that those cats were there to chase the mice and rats that were also residents of Washington at the time. But one of the things about Washington that may no longer be as true as it was when we were there, everything, or a lot of things, were free. All those Smithsonian museums along the mall are free. They're still free. The zoo is free. A lot of things are free, but they're being cut now, which is a tragedy. All the glorious park that surrounds Washington, Rock Creek Park, that has trails that were kept up, and we spent lots of time in Rock Creek Park. But now those funds, like national parks across the country, are being cut. Those things are tragic to me, and it means Washington may change. I fear not. I fear that it will be up to all of us to make sure that some of those cuts don't happen. Another thing that happened while we were there is we were there for the Watergate years. And and I went back to do a little reminding myself about that time, because in 1972, when Nixon was running, people broke into the Democratic headquarters, as you probably all remember. But at the time, it changed the government a great deal. The Senate voted for a special subcommittee to investigate the break-in of the Democratic headquarters, and that vote in the Senate was 73-0. That's a change from the way the votes go today. They're much more partisan. There's Elliot Richardson, who, well, first, Kleindienst was the Attorney General, but he was sort of implicated in some of the break-in facts that they discovered, and so he resigned, and Nixon appointed Elliot Richardson. Elliot Richardson appointed Archibald Cox, who was head of the investigation. He found out that there were tapes of telephone tapes in the White House, and he demanded that they be, he not only demanded, he subpoenaed them for the trial, and Nixon told Richardson to fire Cox, and Richardson refused, and Richardson's assistant deputy attorney general refused. So it was a time when, and those were Republican people standing up for what they thought was right, the rule of law. And the television programs went on day and night throughout the trials, and people were hearing about the rule of law all the time. We need to resurrect that particular demand that we follow what's going on. When Richardson was fired, they called it the Saturday Night Massacre, because also Ruckelshaus went down with him, and then the new Attorney General appointed I'm sorry. It was at the same time Vice President Agnew was stopped for income tax evasion. And so he resigned. The government was really changing, and we thought that was turmoil. We thought that was the nation in serious trouble. But it is nothing at all like what's been going on in this very partisan viewpoint, and nothing at all like what's going on right now. So I think that Gerald Ford was appointed as vice president. And Robert Bork was the one who fired Cox. And that was, by this time we're in 1974, so we've been through one full year of this trial after the Democratic break-in. And it's interesting to note that when the House had discussed the possibilities of impeaching Nixon, it came to a vote, and the House at that time had 21 Democrats and 17 Republicans. They voted for impeachment with 6 Republicans switching over to join the Democrats. And then Nixon made him his "I am not a crook" speech, and 11 more Republicans joined the Democrats for a possible impeachment, but Nixon resigned. So those times prove that government can do the right thing, it can work hard, it can take time and struggle, but there are things that can be done. So why I wrote Capital Code, I wanted to celebrate the good in government while admitting that change for the better and change for improvements are always necessary. And improvements are in change for improvements, not for terminations, because the agencies in the country were performing. Lila McKnight on ad staff was an expert on the Capitol, but when it came to writing about it, I needed more research. I learned that a gas lamp had caused a fire requiring a new floor in this tiny little one building that was the Supreme Court, the Senate, and the House. And they found a cat's paws in the new cement that was laid. And I then had the fun of finding those cat's paws for myself and then telling them, the kids, about it in my children's book. And that reminds me that I watched, and I don't know, I hope many of you did, the Harvard graduation last week, because Abraham Verghese was the speaker. And he was a physician who raised in Ethiopia, trained in Ethiopia and also in the US. But he wrote these moving novels about being a doctor in Ethiopia and about political turmoil in Ethiopia. And he gave 2 pieces of advice to the graduates at Harvard. And one was, read novels. Well, read novels. Read Sean's novels. Here they are. She can't do as I did, bring books, because it's done through her publisher. But she has orders.
Marketing materials.
Marketing materials, thank you. So you all can check those out and then buy those books. Sean attends writers in conventions and things of that kind to market her books and to inform others. I did not have that until Regan Burke, who helped organize this dinner tonight and who got me involved with Nancy Thompson, which got me involved with all of you. Without her help, Longreach, my only novel published by a real publisher, not just by me, Longreach would be a fading chimera in the atmosphere, because it takes promotion to sell books. And that's the part of writing that I find very difficult. So I hope to learn from Sean about that, and from all of you about the things that, what Regan has done for me is to put on programs and to encourage other people to put on programs to sell my books. But I'm supposed to be doing things like blogging and going out on the internet and doing fancy things like that I find very difficult. So thank you, Regan, for all of that. Thank you all for coming and listening and thinking about reading novels, mystery novels, all novels, and enjoying yourself. And thank you, Cornerstone, for having us here tonight. And now it's Sean's turn.
I would like to start also by thanking Nancy Thompson and everyone involved in bringing us here. It's been one of the truly exciting things about having become an author is the opportunity to meet people and to be involved in programs that I never thought I would ever be involved in, and also to have sort of overcome a fear of public speaking after all these years. So with listening to Nancy talking about Watergate, that was like a trip down memory lane for me. I was working in the U.S. Attorney's Office at the time, and I remember one police officer who was in like an old clothes unit, and he really looked like he was maybe just back from Woodstock. He had wild hair and kind of a personality to match. And he said he wanted to go back to his 10-year class reunion and be able to tell them he had changed the world. Well, he did, because he made the arrest at Watergate. And so Washington was really fascinating, because somehow there could be a huge story, but someone you knew in some way would be involved. And I spent 34 years working for the government until my last job. I went on vacation and I came back, and there had been a reorganization and my job was abolished. I didn't realize how ahead of the time I was, because that seems to be what a lot of people are unfortunately experiencing right now. But I actually, after 34 years, I was really very happy to be able to take an early out retirement. And I thought I would just slide right into another career of being a writer and get published. Well, I'm going to share with you a blog that I did write, because I had to do that, which I also don't really enjoy, the social media and that aspect of it. But this was a blog about my journey to getting published, and it wasn't quite as easy as I had anticipated. So I titled this, "Just When You Think It's Not Going to Happen." For a very long time, my goal was to write a novel that would be traditionally published. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that it wasn't going to happen. I was okay with that. Well, sort of. After all, I was a produced playwright, and I had other creative outlets, such as knitting and quilting. Better to hang a quilt on the wall than a rejection letter. Long before email and Facebook connected us to the world, I corresponded with domestic and foreign pen pals. Since the local library was the main source of entertainment in the small upstate New York town where I grew up, I had to use creative writing skills to make life seem more interesting than it really was. I loved writing letters and even liked researching and writing term papers for school assignments. After graduating from Averett College in Danville, Virginia, I accepted a job with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. One job led to another, and during those years, I earned a degree in Administration of Justice from American University. We both went to AU. Always a student, I took numerous continuing education courses in various writing disciplines. My bookshelves were filled with reference books relating to how to write a novel. As a mystery fan, I knew that was what I wanted to write. And years of working with cops and the courts gave me plenty of material. But I didn't tap into those memories. Instead, I created an amateur female sleuth who owned a stationery store and wrote letters for individuals who sought her assistance. In doing so, she would get involved and ultimately solve a mystery. I knew from attending lots of writers' conferences that it was difficult to get published without an agent and difficult to find an agent without being published. With a finished manuscript, I queried several agents who represented cozies. And in the mystery world, there's a lot of several subgenres. Cozies are the Jessica Fletcher Murder, She Wrote type of story. Some queries were never acknowledged, and some included encouraging comments. None offered representation. Following the advice I had heard many times, I started working on another manuscript, this time an historically based police procedural featuring a female detective. Researching life in pre-World War II Washington, D.C. was fascinating, and incorporating those details added authenticity to the story. I sent out query letters and spoke with agents and publishers at conferences. Some requested sample chapters and the full manuscript, but none offered representation or publication. It was decision time. Do I stay with this character and write another story? I did find writing a police procedural much more to my liking than an amateur sleuth, but something about the female protagonist didn't feel right. I decided to scrap the character and the historical setting. The result was very different. In my third attempt, I captured the gritty reality of years spent in testosterone-driven environments. Surprisingly, with a male veteran homicide detective as the protagonist, I found my voice. The process began anew, writing, rewriting, submitting to an independent editor, rewriting, more rewriting, and submitting. After previous attempts seeking representation or publication, I knew the drill. I sent out query letters and waited. I registered for mystery conferences and checked the attendee list to see which agents and publishers I would try to meet. Despite the networking, my goal of getting published remained elusive. In 2018, I attended BoucherCon in St. Petersburg, Florida. That's the largest annual mystery conference, and it's named for Anthony Boucher, who was the New York Times mystery critic. The conference usually draws about 1,500 to 2,000 mystery fans, authors, agents, publishers, all types of industry professionals. Rather than set myself up for disappointment, I decided to just explore a place where I'd never been, visit with friends, and most of all, just relax. Little did I know that a conversation over a cup of tea in the hospitality suite would change my life. It was interesting to hear about Helene Mario's series character, Maggie O'Shea. As we chatted, she told me about her publisher, Ocean View Publishing. She suggested I attend their presentation and introduce myself. I did, and after briefly describing my manuscript, I was invited to submit chapters. That November, I met friends at the huge International Quilt Show in Houston. Thinking about hibernating during the approaching Chicago winter, I added to my fabric stash. With a much heavier suitcase, I headed to the airport for my flight home. While waiting to board, I checked my email. Based on my submission, Ocean View was requesting the full manuscript. A few weeks later, Pat and Bob Gusson, they were the founders of Ocean View Publishing, called to discuss what would become Relentless. On December 21st, 2018, I signed a book contract. It was an extremely cold winter in Chicago, and I spent lots of time in front of the computer, not the sewing machine. But eventually, I put some of that fabric to good use, a baby quilt for my Pilates trainer. At 44, she was thrilled to be pregnant for the first time. So just when you think it's not going to happen. And so that's pretty much my story. It was that represents about 20 plus years of sticking to it. But I'm very, very glad I did. It's been a really good ride. And I thank Nancy for talking about my book. I didn't expect that. That's great. And although I don't have any here for sale, the distributor has decided to do kind of a summer sale. And so if you do read ebooks on Kindle, both books are available for for June and July at $1.99 each.
Oh,
So
it's a it's a bargain you can't turn down.
and so I think, can we open it to questions?
We'd love questions. Well done.
Yes, indeed, we should open up for questions. And also, if any of you purchased one of Nancy's books and would like it signed, we can make that happen as well after the Q&A. Are there questions? Please use your mics and just press the button.
I have a question. You both spoke about research. So how do you define research? Are you going to libraries? You obviously used your own experience because you had that, but talk more about what kind of research you're doing.
After you.
Okay. Well, that is one of the things that I really do like about the internet. It's very easy to do a lot of research. If you have to use maps and just by and large, for the two books I've done, I didn't have to do a lot of research, but for the one that I'm working on, I did for a particular scene. And fortunately, I have a cousin who's a retired ATF agent, and so I consider him my consultant. Because you have to be really careful about getting things right, because otherwise people will let you know. And it also can stop somebody right in the middle of a story if something is really wrong. And
My research for Longreach, which is not the Capital Code one, but Longreach takes place in British Columbia, and it's on the Strait of Georgia. So it's beautiful territory that's being polluted. And I had several things that I wanted to do to research. One was the local library. I learned a lot about pollutants and the organizations that worked against polluting. But I also went to a pulp mill, which is one of the one of the chief, or was one of the chief causes of the pollution. And I have also, I had characters in it who were native born, and I had to do research about their stories and did a lot of that. So for me, Long Reach was a long process of library research, on-the-ground research, visual research, because we drove up and down the coast and made observations. But I agree with everything that Sean was saying. If it's really wrong, it'll throw people off. And I don't know if I have everything right about the pollutions and about the changes and how they came about. But it was not for not trying to cover some of those territories to make it smoother and easier. There's a question.
Does the type of research you're describing precede most of the writing of the book, or is it at the same time or after it?
Do you want to answer that, John?
Sure. It's both. And Nancy and I talked about this. I do a lot of work before I ever start writing. I kind of actually probably obsess too much about it, but by outlining and then even extending the outline so that I know before I start the whole story, where some writers just what they call pantsers, they fly by the seat of their pants. They just sit down and start writing. And I just can't do that. Because research, especially like when I was doing the one about the pre-World War II Washington, the research is so fascinating. You can get so bogged down in that's a lot more fun than actually the writing, at least for me. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, enough now. Plus, you don't need to put in every detail, because that slows down the story.
So I'm a pantser, and we discovered that in our conversation. I get going, and then I have a character who comes to me, and she's she's a native Canadian, and I have to find out her background, and then I have to research that. And then I also had my lead character accused of murdering her, or trying to murder her husband, which made my children very nervous. But I had to research what he was going through in the hospital with his inability to breathe and etc. So I needed the symptoms, I needed some of the cures, I needed all of that. So I do my research as the book demands, having done some in advance for the overall story. Does that help answer questions? Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Yes, there are. Go
You
ahead.
have to get over here.
Do you have a different character for each book, or do you stick with the same character usually?
Well, Sean has her detective in 2 of these novels, and then he has a different girlfriend in both. I shouldn't leak that, but you'll want to find out. In my case, my second and third novels are totally different, and I had totally new characters, and I fall in love with my characters, and so I'm delighted to have these new people in my life, and my characters boss me around. And so things unfold because sometimes they're naughty and sometimes they're nice. And so having new characters is fun for me. But they do come out of nowhere, and I hope they do go somewhere on their pages.
Something I could add, in Duplicity, there's scenes from Washington, from Chicago, rather, and it is a new love interest that brings him to Chicago. And after Duplicity came out, I got an email from a retired Chicago homicide detective, and he told me that he appreciated that I had presented the police in a positive light, and that he enjoyed everything about Duplicity except the stuff about the Cubs. He hates the Cubs. So he didn't have to tell me he was a South Sider.
Okay. Other questions? Well, I just want to thank both of you. This has just been delightful, Nancy and Sean. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing so much of your experience, your life experiences in Washington, and your experiences with writing, because I think we all envy your ability to do this. And I talked with a couple of people here in the audience, and they said, oh, I wouldn't. I wrote a textbook, but I could never write a novel. And I said, well, after tonight, maybe you want to rethink that. So I think what you've shared with us is really inspirational, and we really appreciate it.
And
We
it's-
have some novelists sitting at that table and some text people sitting at that table. So it's,
And it's never too late to get started.
There you go.
well, I can testify to that because I published my first book with a publisher when I was 89, going 3 months from being 90. So it's never too late.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and we hope to see you in September, first Friday in September, when we'll be back with Joe Ferguson. So thank you so much.
And
Did you
that's a
wanna say
good
something?
program. He is wonderful, and you will be fascinated with his plans for the charter. Yeah.
Thanks for the plug, Nancy. Oh, you're welcome.